The reason why sometimes people are very, very wealthy, but they still feel an incredible vacuum within their heart is because perhaps they've pursued artha minus the dharma.
But the flip side of that is that everyone's looking to succeed very quickly.
Ultimately, it's our own mind. Nayam jano me sukha dukha hetur na devatatma griha karma kalaha param karam aramam amananti samsara chakram parivartayadyat. I look back in my life and I suffered so much, but I realized that the cause of my suffering was not other people. Na devatatma. Cause of my suffering is not the devas or the gods who are conspiring against me. Na graha. I realized the cause of my suffering is not my bad astrology, not even my own karma, not even time. He says the param karanam, the ultimate cause of our suffering is our mind. I wanted to go to a place where I could hear my heart. I wanted to go to a place where I could challenge my thinking, and I wanted to go to a place where I could find authentic knowledge.
But why Iskcon? Why Mumbai? How did you discover that? Today I spoke with S.B Keshava Swami, a spiritual author, community mentor, dynamic teacher, and worldwide traveler. He travels the world with one mission: to share wisdom that breathes. I was very, very nervous before actually talking to Keshava Swamiji, because he has traveled the world and met lakhs of people to tell them or to share with them what he has learned from the Bhagavad Gita. Today we spoke about an array of topics. I spoke and asked him, what is it like to be a monk? Does he still often get embroiled, with the normal power play and struggles that we have in corporate life? How can we root values in the Bhagavad Gita when we think about building our companies or building company culture? And I think that's very important in this day and age. I also spoke with him about, what is the way for us to quit our addictions. He had a very, very cool idea, and do listen in to actually understand what his ideas were. Please do tune in to listen to this enlightened conversation, and please do subscribe and follow us so that I can keep bringing absolutely amazing guests like Swamiji. Pranam Swamiji, it's such an honor to have you on Pragyaan. I know you've had a very, very tight schedule in India, and yet you've been able to make time and come here and record with me. I really appreciate it. I feel privileged and honored.
Thank you so much, Pragya. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I've been on a 2-week or 3-week disconnection in Vrindavan. Every year I try to take some time to re-energize, realign, and reassess my life and the direction in which I'm going. So it's been a beautiful time, and as I think happens when you fill up your cup, it starts overflowing and you're kind of ready to come out in the big wide world again and share. So happy to be here.
So, I'll pick up from there and ask you, what were some of the awakenings that you had while, if you're happy to share that, just in the last 2 weeks, something that came to you which you now want to take forward in the coming months?
Yeah, every year what I do is I try to not just set New Year's resolutions, but set a New Year kind of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And my meditation for 2024 was to embrace challenge and to embrace going into the unknown. They say the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, we've always done it this way. And so I thought to myself this year as I was coming to Vrindavan on the flight, that let this year be a year in which I explore unknown areas, unknown things, opportunities that I've not investigated thus far. And I think in Vrindavan, then I was there and I was thinking, what are the next things that I need to embrace in my life to discover more of the spiritual reality that I'm seeking to grasp? And so some ideas came of spaces and activities and risks that I should be willing to embrace this year. So, yeah, that's on my mind.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
You took a similar risk when you were just 21 years old when you decided to leave London, which is where you've been born and brought up, and you decided to come to Bombay or Mumbai and spend your time in an Iskcon temple in Chapati because you were a seeker at that point. I really want to understand a little bit about how did you discover? I mean, you kind of knew that what you were living was not the life you wanted to live. There was something more to it. But why Iskcon? Why Mumbai? How did you discover that? Because there are a lot of us who are finding those answers for ourselves, but we don't know where to start.
Yeah. Of course, I grew up in London and I was going to the Hare Krishna temple, the Iskcon temple from a young age.
Oh.
And when I was 15, these existential questions began arising in my heart. And because I was going to the temple, it was naturally the first port of call. And the first book I received was the Bhagavad Gita. And thus began my spiritual search. And then when I was 21, I naturally thought about how to take that a little deeper. Coming to India had many purposes. One purpose was obviously because India is the land of spirituality, the land of Dharma, and the land of the Bhagavad Gita. But also India for me was thousands of miles away from London, which was a good thing because I felt as though I needed to just take some distance from the opinions, the responsibilities, the identities that I had surrounded myself with thus far. So I came to Mumbai, and as I said, I guess it was because I had prior exposure to Iskcon. I never saw it so much as entering an Iskcon temple and living in an Iskcon community. It wasn't the Hare Krishna aspect of it which was on the first thing on my mind. I think the most important thing to me was I wanted to go to a place where I could hear my heart. I wanted to go to a place where I could challenge my thinking, and I wanted to go to a place where I could find authentic knowledge. And it just happened to be the Iskcon temple, and somehow my path continued in that direction.
I'm so glad that it did because we can now tap into all the knowledge that you have. But Swamiji, can you help me understand what does it really mean to be a monk? And what are the various aspects that go into it, and how has your life changed?
I guess the most basic mantra that we try to live by is simple living, high thinking. We try to simplify our interactions with the world, the way we dress, the way we eat, the kind of our lifestyle on a day-to-day basis. And by doing that, what we try to do as monks is create more of a headspace, more of a breathing space and a thinking space within our consciousness, where we can actually begin to contemplate deeper subject matter. It's very interesting, even in the corporate world today, many CEOs, they talk about something called satisficing, where they say that most people in the world today suffer from decision-making fatigue. Like, we have to make thousands of decisions on, really speaking, inconsequential things, like what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to eat, the way which I'm going to, And what happens is, because we expend so much energy in making small decisions, when it comes to actually the big things, the significant things, the paradigm shifting things, we don't have the energy or the patience to invest more time in thinking about those things. And so I think as monks, and not just monks, I think everyone can live with that monk mindset of how do I declutter my life so that I can open up room to actually think about more meaningful things. And I guess that would be the basis of monastic, the monastic mindset, and then we kind of build from there.
Yeah, no, so well said. I think, often, I think when I was young, we would just wander and it was okay to be bored. Now I think it's almost as if I'm not doing something or the other every minute, which is listening to a podcast or learning a new skill, does not allow for that space which you're talking about. And I think you beautifully put it, where we can create those spaces for ourselves almost every day in life. You mentioned about going to various corporates, and I've seen that you've been to Google, Salesforce, like all the top tech companies around the world. And I really want to understand, when you interacted with them, what are some of the themes that emerged that often the employees there or the people who work there are thinking about?
When I go to the corporates, I see the inner Arjun in every single one of them.
Yeah.
The Bhagavad Gita is such an amazing book because it doesn't tell us to be a recluse. It doesn't tell us to walk away from the world. It doesn't tell us to give up responsibility in our day-to-day life. But it's very much a book about integration. And so Arjun, and the kind of existential confusions that he goes through, I see that within so many people in the world, wondering about their purpose, their meaning, wondering whether the things that they're doing are actually going to bring them happiness, wondering about how to kind of marry their deeper spiritual aspirations with their daily responsibilities. And so in terms of what I share with the corporates, I guess one of the taglines I use with them is that it's not that spiritualists don't own anything, but it's that spiritualists aren't owned by anything.
Beautiful.
And it's so much for them about how to function in that atmosphere, how to be successful, how to earn money, how to look after all of their responsibilities, but in such a way that it doesn't consume them, but rather those become inspiring things to elevate their consciousness. And so we try to share with them how to add more Dharma into their artha. Artha means economic development, and Dharma means the spiritual principles, or the righteousness that we live by. And when we bring Dharma into the artha, then it becomes not just material success, but spiritually elevating as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I think that brings me really to a very pertinent question that we are dealing with in India, which is, now we have many, many unicorns, and, with PM Modi talking about Startup India, there's a lot of enthusiasm in youngsters now who want to become job creators and, have startups. But the flip side of that is that everyone's looking to succeed very quickly. And what that means is often that comes with, lack of transparency. We're having a lot of corporate governance issues. And in the context of what you said, the dharma with the artha, can you maybe share, some principles that a lot of these founders, or us even as, professionals, can think about, where the corporate environment can become far more value-based, and not only thinking about materialistic success, but like you said, a success which also elevates society and community?
Yeah. The Vedic progression is Dharma, Artha, Kama, and then Moksha. Now, when we look at these four things beyond just activities, but as principles, we get a very deep insight. That the journey begins with Dharma means that the foundation of our life should be character, should be values. That's why when you go to school, the first thing they teach you, even before knowledge, is character. That's what we should learn first. And then what happens is, any artha that we then pursue in this world, if it's found upon living by proper principles, proper character, then not only is that artha going to reach its full potentiality, but it's going to be sustainable, and it's actually going to be able to fulfill yourself and create a beautiful environment around you, which then goes to talk about karma, because karma means the fulfillment of our desires. The reason why sometimes people are very, very wealthy and it seems that they've fulfilled their desires, but they still feel an incredible vacuum within their heart, is because perhaps they've pursued artha minus the dharma. And therefore that karma, that real fulfillment of the desire, doesn't come even when they are successful.
So true.
They're failed successes, because they've succeeded, but it hasn't led to a fulfillment because it wasn't founded on something deeper. So Dharma is a foundation. Pursue your artha. That will really lead to a fulfillment and an achievement. And then moksha means that all of that will help you to realize that there's more. When you actually become successful, but you do it in a spiritual way, you do it with character behind it, then eventually what it helps you to realize is, okay, this was fine, this helps me right now, but there's more. There's something deeper to search for. And therefore this is a beautiful aspect, like in many theologies of the world, it's very much about saying material things are bad. Spirituality means not material. But the Eastern, the Vedic, the theology of the Bhagavad Gita is so incredible, because it doesn't say we have to turn away from the material, but it talks about how to pursue the material in such a way that it will lead to also the spiritual elevation side by side. So, yeah, rather than in our corporate endeavors, our desire to be entrepreneurial, rather than doing it in what we would call rajas, or the mode of passion, we try to do it in sattva, because we realize that when you do things with quality, then it ultimately leads to greater in the long term and a deeper fulfillment.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I also want to understand from you, there's this perception that we have that, you're a monk, so you're all cocooned from the struggles of life, the power play that we need to go through in the corporate world, or the materialistic desires that we have. I want to know from you, what are your struggles now that you're a monk? How are they different from what you routinely have people like me come up to you and ask you about, Swamiji, what do I do about this? Swamiji, what do I do about that? So what are your struggles and what do you fall back on?
Well, I think we all live with the mind. And if we think about all of our problems and we trace them back to the root cause, then ultimately it's our own mind.
Yeah.
In a very beautiful verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, one person who's gone through many, many experiences in his life, he looks back and he says in a very beautiful verse, Nayam jano me sukha dukha hetur na devatatma griha karma kalaha param karam aramam amananti samsara chakram parivartayadyat. He says, I look back in my life and I suffered so much. Nayam jano. But I realized that the cause of my suffering was not other people. Na devatatma. The cause of my suffering is not the devas or the gods who are conspiring against me. Na graha. I realized the cause of my suffering is not my bad astrology. Karma. He says, I realized the cause of my suffering was not even my own karma. He says, Kala. I realized that the cause of my suffering is not even time. He says, Param karan amananti mana. He says, the param karanam, the ultimate cause of our suffering is our own mind. And therefore we, have the famous saying, the mind can make heaven out of hell and hell out of heaven. And so I think as monks, we also find our ingenious ways to find problems because we're still carrying a mind. And so that's why every morning the way we deal with that is by spending time in the mind gym, meditating, bringing ourselves back, identifying with our deepest self, learning not to identify with the mind, but to identify the mind. And to create that little bit of distance between our mental narrative. And some days it works very well, and other days we struggle. Some days we face great adversity and we display a great resilience, and other days we struggle and then we take help from others and we try to remind ourselves and we come back again. It's a journey. And I guess what we encourage people to do to deal with that roller coaster of life is just spend time, invest it in your own development of your own consciousness and your mind. And that's why meditation is such an indispensable thing in this day and age.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and why I'm pushing you a little bit on this is because, very often when we read the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, we find that a lot of the teachings there are very esoteric. And how do I really connect with it? And so therefore, the reason I'm pushing you is I want to understand that, yes, even if we can go back to an example about something that you struggled with recently, and then how did you create that distance that you're talking about between you and your mind and really come out of it?
Yeah. I was in Vrindavan. I came to Vrindavan for spiritual connection. And one day I got into an argument with someone, a needless argument, friction over nothing that significant. We're still battling with our ego. That evening something interesting happened. I was trying to go to sleep, and Vrindavan is also a noisy place. India is a noisy place. But in Vrindavan, most sounds tend to disappear at a certain time in the night. But there's one sound that night that kept going. And that was the sound of dogs fighting. All night the dogs were barking and fighting, and I was lying there in my bed in Vrindavan having earlier that day had a needless argument. And I realized it was divinity's way of telling me, don't get into unnecessary dog fights. The dogs are fighting over nothing that's significant. They seem to work it out, and then again, just a small trigger and they're barking at each other again. And I was sitting there thinking, how many times have I got into needless arguments? Even if I've won the argument, I've lost a relationship, I've lost my peace of mind, I've lost my focus. And the way I processed all of this is that the very next day I woke up and I journal. And I wrote it down. This is what happened to me in the day. This is what happened to me at night. I can see a very clear teaching, a very clear insight emerging here. And when I tend to write things down, then it helps me to actually process my struggles. It helps me to learn how to turn pain into progress. It helps me to learn how to turn problems into positivity. And so one of the ways in which I do it is through journaling. I find it's a great way to reflect on what we're going through in a dispassionate way, bringing in spiritual wisdom and drawing out lessons which then give you a little bit of relief and a bit of a sense of, this is how I move forward.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
No, because often we do that at work. Yeah. Often we do that in relationships at home.
Yeah.
Where I have always read about Maya Angelou, and she has a beautiful saying where she said, it's not about the work you do, but it's about how you make people feel. And I think we often forget that when we're just trying to struggle and win all the time. And so, I mean, really talking about relationships, what is it that we can take from the Bhagavad Gita where we can have many more fulfilling relationships in our personal lives, but also generally at work? What can we do? How can we work on ourselves to build many more stronger relationships?
Yeah. In the world today, people are scared of being alone. They think being alone means loneliness. But the Bhagavad Gita tells us that being alone can also be called solitude. Loneliness seems to be something which will drain your energy and bring you down. But when you start thinking about alone time as solitude, then you can see that that time in solitude is uplifting, energizing, clarifying, and inspiring. It's interesting that the Bhagavad Gita tells us the first step to having amazing relationships with others is to be at peace with yourself, to be fulfilled within, to be more aware of your own personality and your own weaknesses and strengths and your own inner territory. And I think most people try to have amazing relationships with others, but they haven't found peace with themselves. And so the first thing that the Gita teaches us is that when you spend time alone and you become fulfilled, then when you go into a relationship, you go in as a more fulfilled, a more complete individual, and therefore you're able to interact in a much more selfless way. And I guess that would then be the second thing that the Gita really teaches us, that the depth of any relationship is proportionate to the amount of selflessness in that relationship. Our Eastern teachers often tell us that the purest type of love in the world is the love between a mother and a child.
Yeah.
And that's not to take away anything from the fathers.
Yeah.
But there is a special connection because the level of sacrifice of a mother in relation to her child is perhaps unparalleled. And therefore the love is incredibly deep. And so whether it's love between friends, love between partners, love between you and your guru, love between you and God, it all goes as deep as the selflessness in that relationship. The selflessness in its essence means to always be thinking, how can I contribute in this relationship to help this person be the best they can?
Yeah. No, you're so right. I had a few episodes ago, I had somebody come in and talk about how when you go outside in the world, we should behave like givers and not takers. And we had so many people commenting, saying, I'm giving, but I'm in a toxic relationship. I keep giving, and yet, I'm not getting the fulfillment that I'm looking for, or that I'm being walked all over and taken for granted. So therefore, I think just what does that line look like is often very, very important.
Yeah, and that's why I said it really means to look at in a relationship, how can I do the best for this person? The mother is the biggest giver, but the mother's also the first person to tell the child no.
Yes.
When it's necessary. And it's necessary sometimes quite often. But behind that no is a heart which is saying, yes, I know what you want, I know what you're looking for, but this is not the way to do it. When we're in a relationship and someone is mistreating us, not only is it harmful to us, but it's harmful to them.
Right.
And therefore, in that relationship, it's also selfless to say, I'm not going to let you continue to act like this, because not only does it bring me down, but it brings you down. We say relationships have their own mathematical science. Normally 1 + 1 = 2. But in the science of relationships, 1 + 1 = 0, 1 + 1 = 1, and 1 + 1 can also equal infinity. And I'll explain what I mean. Sometimes in relationships, 1 + 1 = 0, because when two people come together, but they have no sense of exchange, interaction, mutual benefit, like how they can contribute, then those two people come together and they actually destroy each other. Toxic relationships.
So true.
1 + 1 can also equal 1. When two people come together, they have a level of sensitivity towards the other person, but essentially they're still fixated on what am I going to get out of this. And therefore in that 1 + 1, it equals 1 because no one really changes, no one really develops. That's what we call a transactional relationship. But 1 + 1 in the science and mathematics of relationship can also equal infinity when two people come together, with a very selfless mood of how can I help this person to be the best they can be. And when those two people come together, then it can be infinity because the opportunities are endless. I felt this very much with, for example, relationships with spiritual teachers who I felt, came into my life with no agenda, no personal motivation, but were only thinking like, how can I bring out the best in this person? And I try to relate to them in such a way to think, how can I assist them in the great work that they're trying to do for humanity? And in that relationship with the Guru, mystical, magical, momentous things happened, because 1 + 1 can equal infinity.
Amazing. Absolutely. I mean, we were talking earlier on, and I was telling you I have a guru, and his name is Daji. I mean, his name is Kamlesh Patel, but we fondly call him Daji. And when you were talking about that, 1 + 1 equals to infinity, that's the thought that I had, that the quality of that relationship can only be mostly with your guru, where all he's thinking about or all she's thinking about is what is best for you. And therefore, I think, how is that the selflessness that you spoke about when it comes to a guru and a bhakt relationship vis-a-vis any of the others that we have in life, which you have obviously experienced? What do you think the fabric of that relationship, how is that different?
Of course, with a spiritual teacher, a guru, our relationship starts from the point of transcendence. Of course, sometimes people approach a guru for also materialistic reasons. That's
more often than not,
more
yeah.
often than not, yeah. But if we talk about, I think in your journey, and I could also say in my journey, I connected with my guru for the purpose of exploring spiritual possibility and what that is. And therefore, I think because that relationship begins from a very spiritual point, it naturally takes that trajectory. With other relationships in the world, there are many other considerations that come into play. When it's parents, when it's siblings, even when it's a partner, we're connecting, but we're connecting with also many material identities that have brought us together. And it's not that those material identities are inconsequential, but we have to make sure that beyond those material things which are bringing us together, we realize that there's a deeper spiritual reason why we've come together.
True.
Your parents are not just your parents because of some random biology, but we also, as we become spiritually deeper, we understand I became the children of these individuals because there's something we have to do in this life to help each other. The person you marry is not just the person you were attracted to and somehow the chemistry just happened, but there was a deeper thing bringing you together because each of you have to support each other on this journey. And I think when we begin to look at our relationships like that in the world, like what was the deeper reason why we came together? And what is it that I have that I can contribute to you? And when we start doing that in every relationship, we start to feel it to be a lot more satisfying and deep.
Surely. And therefore, you said we are born where we are because somewhere, it was our destiny. And so my question really is, what is the proportions on how we should think about where do I exercise my free will and what elements of this is really destined?
Yeah. Of course, life is an interplay of fate and free will. Our karma, our reactions from previous lives are creating the stage for us now. Broadly speaking, in Eastern theologies, they say 4 things are indicators of your karma. The first thing in Sanskrit we say janma, the family you were born in. The second thing is aishvarya, which means the opulence, the wealth, the material facility. Some people are just destined to be surrounded by wealth and opulence, and others maybe not. The third thing is Shri, your beauty. That's God-given. We may try so many things to maximize it as possible, but pretty much it's set. And the fourth thing is shruta, which means your learning, your cognition, your intellectual capacity. So these things are results of our karma, things that were decided in this life based on previous activities. But according to now how we utilize that janma, that aishwarya, that shruta, that shri, how we employ that in the service of others, in our relationships, in the service of the world, it creates our next destination.
Surely.
So.
I want to talk a little bit about opulence, and that's
Yeah.
because, like you mentioned earlier, money is always looked upon as, some people look at it as good, some people look at it as something which is negative. I often look at it as a tool for me to unlock things in my life. But as a monk and as somebody who's been studying the Bhagavad Gita, what is really a very healthy relationship that we should have with money?
Yeah. It's interesting, the biblical saying that most people think is stated in the Bible is that money is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at the exact translation is actually the love of money is the root of all evil.
Oh.
Which kind of synergizes very much with what you say, that money in itself is neutral. Depends how we employ it, how we use it. So what is a healthy relationship with wealth? I guess the first thing is that the Ishopanishad, which is the foremost of the 108 Upanishads, it begins with a verse, Ishavashyam idam sarvam, that everyone has a quota. And as soon as we begin to hoard and accumulate beyond our quota, then we will find that from that accumulation, it actually creates more complexity and issues in our life. Now, what does that mean? Am I saying just earn as much as you need to put a meal on the dinner table and don't do anything above that? No, we can earn more. We can earn, we can save, we can even be rich and successful and wealthy. But then we have to then know that when I've gone beyond utilizing my wealth for my immediate needs and comforts in life to a reasonable degree, how can I now employ that wealth in seva? And when we do that, then we'll find again that dharma and that artha together really leads to fulfillment because we utilize that wealth. So I would say the first thing is, in the relationship with wealth, number one, try to earn it with dharma. When you do earn it, try to utilize it in your own life as much as is needed without overcomplicating or extravagance. And the third thing is, when you do have excess, try to utilize that for the seva, for the upliftment of others. And I think if we go on that kind of trajectory, then we don't need to be scared of wealth, we don't need to run away, but we're at peace with it.
Oh, I mean, I think great teachings there for many of us to learn and also use in our lives, because then, you make everyone happy around you, not just yourself with the wealth you create.
Yeah.
In this era where we're all talking about technology and AI, generative AI taking over the world, and, there are many questions around, are they going to really take over humanity? And so in that context, I want to ask you, what is really consciousness?
The consciousness is what created the AI.
Yeah, that's true. So well said.
Yeah, it really, AI is an incredibly interesting thing. And the capability, and nowadays they talk about machine learning and how AI just has reached another level of complexity. And it's interesting, even those who are like the masterminds behind AI are kind of coming out in the world and saying like, okay, we need to slow down here, like this is getting dangerous. And therefore even AI speaks to the need to have humanity side by side, like along with that IQ increasing, to have EQ and real understanding of how to utilize it appropriately. But the Bhagavad Gita gives a beautiful analogy. The Gita gives the analogy of a chariot. And what the Gita says is that the chariot is headed by 5 horses, and those 5 horses are the 5 senses. There are reins attached to those horses, and those reins are the mind. The Gita says that there's a driver on that chariot, and that driver is the intelligence holding the reins. And then the Gita says there is a passenger who's directing the driver, and that's the soul. And so AI we can understand to be a technology, something which is bringing our intelligence beyond the processing abilities of our own brain. Yet AI is not conscious in and of itself. AI without human input, without human regulation, doesn't in and of itself do anything. Yes, it can learn and it can compound its understanding and processing of information, but it all has to begin always from a human or from consciousness. And so life comes from life. Life can never come from matter.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. And talking about life, I think we often then talk about death. And in the sort of I remember my father always telling me about the yaksha prashna, which is where Yudhishthir says that the most thing that wonders me is that we see people dying around us, and yet we live our lives as if we are immortals. And so how can we really live our lives in such a fulfilled way that if we were to die tomorrow, we feel like we've done our job or our duty while we've been here?
We were once going to a funeral, and so we were in the car, and we kind of arrived at the crematorium. This was in London, and we parked in the parking spot, and in front of us there was a sea of graves, buried people. And we parked the car, we were looking out, the engine stopped, and just as the engine stopped, the GPS said, "You have reached your final destination." And it was almost like it was like very like, my God, like, is there some deeper spiritual message here?
Yeah.
But yeah, death is a reality, for most people an inconvenient reality. But actually for the spiritualist, the death is actually life's greatest change agent. Steve Jobs said that. He said, every day when I wake up, I ask myself, if today was the last day on this planet, would I do what I'm doing today? And he said, if the answer is no for too many days in a row, then I know I need to change something. And so there's a sense in which we have to live with this consciousness that I could die tomorrow. But at the same time, we might not die tomorrow. We might live for another 30 years. So you have to. So how do we combine those perspectives? And it's a constant challenge, I think. But that's why for us, the early morning is really important. Because what we try to do in the early morning is spend that time to align ourselves with our deepest aspiration. And then once we've aligned ourselves with that deepest aspiration, everything we're doing through the day, we try to make sure that it contributes in some way, shape or form to that ultimate thing that we're doing. I think we begin to have a lot of regrets in our life when we realized I did so many things in my life that didn't contribute to what I ultimately wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me the trick of life, or the life hack, is to somehow live in such a way that everything you're doing is in some way, shape or form contributing to your ultimate aspiration. And in order to do that, the first thing you have to do is know what your ultimate aspiration is. And therefore the Vedas always begin, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. In the beginning you must ask, who am I? Where am I? Why am I? when we have that kind of orientation towards the ultimate goal, then the second challenge is to learn how to integrate, as we were talking about before, everything you're doing so that it contributes. And if you do those two things, I think we'll look back at our lives and not have any regrets, you know. But it requires discipline, you know.
A lot of it.
Yeah, one of my teachers used to say, the pain of discipline is uncomfortable, but the pain of regret is unbearable. So if we're not disciplined, then eventually we'll have regret. And that regret, the pain of that, is 10 times worse. And so yeah, to live with your ultimate, you know, like they say, live with the end in mind, and to align everything with that aspiration.
Yeah. No, I think often we always feel, then what is that purpose? Why am I here? How do I find my purpose? And I think it is said that 3 times in your life you often ask yourself these questions. One is when you go to a funeral, like you said, or you see childbirth, or you see some sort of loss where you are in that state of vairagya, where you ask these questions. But then we often, after 2 days, forget all about that question and get back into our regular routine lives. And so I really want to ask you that, what is the Bhagavad Gita, or even in your experience, the different phases of my life that I have, which is childhood, and then I obviously have my adult life, and then you have, you know, your retired life, so to say, and the Gita talks about it in different phases, but what are the values and what are the goals, short-term goals that I can set for myself in those various phases to make the most of them?
Yeah. In the most ideal world, it's brahmacharya,
Yes.
grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. Brahmacharya means student, grihastha means household, vanaprastha means retired, and sannyas means renunciation. You could say brahmacharya is about learn, grihastha is about earn, vanaprastha is about turn, and sannyas is about burn. No.
You have a
Sannyas is
limerick
about
going there.
sannyas is about return.
Yeah.
And that's basically the life cycle that the Vedas say. In the first 25 years of your life, you should learn, you should create vision, you should know where you're going, what's your ultimate purpose. In the second 25 years of your life, you need to earn, you need to develop some stability, you need to achieve and fulfill your material goals. In the third 25 years of your life, you need to turn. You need to start disentangling yourself from all of that, and start putting more emphasis on what's coming next, what's coming beyond this life. And then in the final 25 years of your life, you need to put the emphasis on immersion in that spiritual reality, so that when we do leave this world, we can seamlessly integrate into that deeper spiritual reality that we seek. So that's in an ideal world. But then here we are, I joined the brahmacharya ashram at 21, and it's supposed to be 0 to 25, so I was like a little late. And so what do we do? So I think you can still take those principles that in your life try to integrate learning. Right? We have to constantly be learners, lifelong learners. Asking questions, investigating, looking at scriptures from different angles of vision. For me, when I began reading books, after some time I realized, oh my God, exploring wisdom is becoming an addiction.
Yeah.
And
It gives you a high, a dopamine.
Yeah. But a good addiction.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't just reading for like, okay, just to hear what everyone has to say. I was reading to try to understand, like, what's life about? And then I was reading and also applying things and trying to live it in my life. Like, does this work? So I think the first thing is that everyone should be a chronic learner. We should always be learning. We have like the story of Narad Muni, in
Yes.
Eastern Vedic theology, we know about he's like a transcendental spaceman, like traveling around the universe, and he's an accomplished, accomplished spiritual. I mean, his name Narada means, one who is giving Narayan to everyone. But it's interesting, in the stories we'll find that even Narad Muni becomes inquisitive, like, what can I learn from others? Like, who is getting the most mercy from the divine? I want to try and find them. I want to speak to people. He's just like endlessly hungry for knowledge. So I think that's a really important thing. I think the other important principle is to always rub shoulders with spiritually accomplished people.
Very true. Your Sangha.
I think, because we learn theology from a book, but we see it in practice in the life of a spiritualist, And I think that Sangha, is so powerful, spiritual friends or people on the journey who you learn from and support each other. And then the third thing I would say is just experiment and apply and do things in your life and see. Be ready to give certain things up and see what happens, and be ready to take certain things up and see what happens. So I guess these are some of the general principles. As we go through our life cycle, if we can implement, then we'll be on a good trajectory.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that why I asked you this question is because if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it says often it can take you lives in order to achieve moksha. And then when you bring it back to these 4 principles, it's almost as if I need to really start my inner journey at the end of my life, when I can barely think, barely walk, can't even sit and meditate because I'm, physically, right? And so very often people do that, right? They think about spirituality is not for me. I'm too young right now. I'm in the corporate world. But from what I'm hearing you say is, that's not true. You need to start as early as you can, first by reading, learning, and then start implementing it as values in your life. And then maybe the last 25 years, dedicatedly, you only do this. But you have to start early.
Yeah. I think people, they think like, if I become too spiritual, I'm going to lose all my ambition.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, if I read the Gita, like parents are like super scared when their children start reading the Gita at like 17, 18, because they're like, this person's going to lose all interest in. But that's why I said people, if they realize that the Gita is equipping you to be materially successful and at the same time spiritually elevated, and that those two things don't have to be in opposition, they're not mutually exclusive. I think spiritual people are the most ambitious because they want to be successful, they want to be sometimes wealthy and influential. Here we are, we're trying to get out there in the world and influence, but we're doing it also for a higher purpose.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with success. We want to be successful, but we want to be successful in the right way, for the right reasons, and in a way which, as I said, elevates and uplifts us. And so, we tell people, begin. The Gita is telling you how to make good decisions. The Gita is telling you how to find love. The Gita is telling you how to avoid burnout. The Gita is teaching you how to find your purpose. Like, these are all the things you need to know at the outset of your journey, not when you're ready to wrap it up. Because by then you've made all your decisions, you've decided your purpose, you've blown all the relationships, Therefore, Kaumara acharet pragyo is said in the Bhagavatam that it should begin right from the young age.
Beautiful. No, I couldn't agree more. I wish, we often learn that early on in our lives, like in our schools and in our colleges, because we're not taught about the fundamentals of what our culture is. And I'm not in no way I'm going to get trolled. I'm not saying Hinduism only, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
just the foundational
Spiritual
values,
principles. Yeah,
that you're
yeah.
talking about. Because then when you do get rich early, which often now it's happening, you get rich early, you have Mark Zuckerberg, you have Steve Jobs, all these people becoming billionaires early on in their lives.
Yeah.
If there is that spiritual elevation that comes with it, and luckily for Mark it was, because he had come to India for his spiritual journey on guidance of Steve Jobs. So then you don't lose that wealth so easily, because
Grounded. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for sure. And I think that's why the Gita is equipping us for whatever may come in our life. The Gita is equipping you for all the life quakes, all the things that are going to shake you. But the amazing thing is that the Gita is also equipping you for success. Because sometimes success can be more dangerous than all of those other life quakes put together. Success can break people if they don't know how to respond to it, if they don't know how to utilize it. And so the Gita is equipping us in all ways to navigate this world, whatever it may bring, success or failure, fame or infamy, ups or downs, pain or potentiality, whatever may come, how to process it. When you read the Gita, you're not just learning an old set of ideas. You're receiving a new pair of glasses. That's what I tell people.
And like you say often in your lectures that I've heard, that these are almost questions that have come down centuries, no matter what the evolution has been, whether we've had computers or not had computers, mobile phones or not mobile phones. These fundamental questions of why we exist and what we are doing are almost
Perennial.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
in very
yeah.
many ways. This is actually a great point where we can wrap the conversation. But I'm very curious to ask you, and that's because a lot of us now, because we don't have this beautiful anchor, that you're referring to, whether that's in the Bhagavad Gita or a spiritual practice or whatever that could be for us, we often look to addictions and look to substance abuse or look to alcohol to give us that support, because we don't have the strength in us to face what life is throwing at us, and so we escape through these addictions. How can we make sure that we don't firstly fall into those addictions, and if we are suffering and we want to quit, any advice you have, because I'm sure you go around the world, and I'm sure people come to you saying, I'm smoking, I want to quit, or I'm drinking, I want to quit, but I don't know how.
Yeah. Yeah, Oscar Wilde, he said, I can resist everything except temptation. So it's interesting. There was a study recently, and they asked people, what are the main ways in which you relax? I'll ask you this question, okay? So the 4 top answers of the top 4 ways in which people relax are: number 1, they go on holiday. Number 2, they watch a movie. Number 3, they go to sleep. And number 4, they take intoxication. Okay? So Pragya, let me ask you, I'll repeat them. What do you think the common thing between all 4 of those things are? Number 1, take intoxication. Number 2, go to sleep. Number 3, go on holiday. Number 4, watch a movie.
They're all in many ways going away from their reality and their life, their day-to-day life.
Exactly.
It's escaping.
Each one of those are a form of escapism.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting, that in order to find a space of almost a sacred space where you can relax, we feel a need to escape from this world. And the Gita says, of course, because you're not meant to be in this world. So the desire to escape this world and enter into a different space is a very natural one. The Christian writer C.S. Lewis said, if I find a desire within myself which no experience of this world can fulfill, I must conclude I was made for another world. So we are constantly trying to move out of this world because it's not where we're meant to be. But then we use artificial means to try to escape this world. You can go to sleep, but then you have to wake up.
Yeah.
You can watch a movie, but then it ends. even if it's Bollywood. You can go on holiday, but you can't be on a holiday all year round. You have to come back. And you can take intoxication, but then there's the morning after, the night before. You have to wake up. And so it's a real problem, Pragya, in the world today. Like, I don't know if they have it in India, but this like 12-step program, rehabilitation, it's a huge thing because people are really suffering from that. So perhaps, we can end on this, and I'll share an acronym for you of how we advise people to overcome temptations. And the acronym is, if you want to overcome addiction, it will cost you. C-O-S-T. C stands for conviction. The only way you can overcome an addiction is if you have a conviction of some greater thing that you're trying to achieve, which necessitates you to forego that. You understand? Like when you have something great you're trying to achieve, you're like, why will I fall prey to this? Because I need to get to this place.
True.
So the first thing is conviction. The second thing is openness. If you want to overcome any addiction, then you need to have the openness to be able to discuss and openly share your successes and failures with trusted friends. S stands for safety. If you want to overcome an addiction, then don't expose yourself to people, places, or environments in which that desire will be agitated. Protect the fences that protect you. And T, which is perhaps the most important, and which perhaps most recovery programs in the world don't necessarily know how to approach. T stands for taste, which means how can you find a spiritual taste, a spiritual experience, a spiritual fulfillment, which can help you to look at that temporary addiction and pleasure and say, that's so small. Why would I go for that temporary? I have something so much greater that I'm experiencing. And so if you want to overcome addiction, conviction that there's something much better you're aiming for, openness, share your struggles with someone, safety, be careful of what you expose yourself to, and ultimately T, taste, try to experience something much higher, which then means you can give up the lower taste.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I know you want to wrap up, but I'm going to ask you one.
Oh yeah, no, it's for sure.
Because I love Vrindavan. I went there last year now. I went there twice.
You lost your heart in Vrindavan.
I actually did, to be honest. I've been there earlier and all I could see was the dirt, the noise, the crowd. And this time, because I went with someone, as I was telling you, with Mohanji, who's also from Iskcon, he sort of brought that place alive for me. You know, because I think for very often people like me who have not gone to temples, if somebody tells me the why, which is why am I here, with what, how should I approach this deity, how should I approach, with what feeling do I enter the temple, it just suddenly becomes alive for me and I can connect, or at least try to connect with that feeling. And so with that in mind, you know, if I'm a sadhaka and I'm a seeker and I go to Vrindavan, with what lens and how should I approach Vrindavan and all the various temples that are there?
To see a spiritual place, you can't see a spiritual place through the eyes. You have to see the spiritual place through the ears.
Beautiful. I love it.
You have to hear from those who have understood that place, who are seeing something deeper. And when we hear their words, then we see through their eyes. When I first came to Vrindavan, I said to the devotee that was there, I said, this is noisy. This is unclean, and people are just trying to take my money.
Yeah.
and I said, how can this be the spiritual? You're telling me this is the spiritual world, but why would God allow this, you know, seeming very materialistic, external environment? And he told me something beautiful. He said, the holy place is like a deep ocean in which there are so many jewels, but that deep ocean is covered by a thin layer of oil. And if you come to that ocean and you simply look at it, on first glance you'll think it's an ocean of oil. But if you're able to penetrate beyond just that top layer, and you're able to then dive a little deeper, then you'll find many, many jewels. So I realized at some point that I have to dig a little deeper here. I'm just seeing the externals, and therefore I need to hear from someone who can help me to see what the deeper reality is here. You see, if we went to Vrindavan and it was just very beautiful with many gardens and peacocks and birds and flowing waterfalls and fragrant smells, we may just think that is Vrindavan. It's so beautiful. And we'd only see Vrindavan for its external beauty. So he said sometimes what Krishna arranges is that Vrindavan externally becomes almost something you turn away from. But then what we're forced to do is try to go deeper and understand what's the deeper significance of Vrindavan, so that we're not allured by the external, and that rather we see the internal spirit there. I don't know if that makes sense, but...
Oh, it's beautifully said.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Because you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
If you are really yearning, then you are bound to find that quiet corner and shut your eyes and all that noise and chaos to really say that if people have been coming here for generations and finding the purpose of their life, if I'm not being able to see it, there's something not okay with me. And not with the place.
So Vrindavan forces us to go a little deeper. It's not just giving us beautiful gardens and beautiful scenery, because then we just come to Vrindavan for beautiful gardens and beautiful scenery. But we're coming to Vrindavan to find Krishna, to purify ourselves of material vision. And therefore Vrindavan, even in its seeming imperfection of pollution and all of that, is giving us another gift to go deeper.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank
and what's next for you? How does your year look?
Yeah, sometimes when I think about that, I feel exhausted already.
I'm actually quite surprised. Just the last 2 weeks that I've heard your program, and even this morning, you were already at somebody's home doing a pravachan, doing a session, and then you've come here, you're doing a podcast, and everyone on the ground is sort of literally extracting as much as they can out of you.
It's an honor to be able to serve. But no, we will be traveling. We'll be racking up the air miles. I'll be doing something to cover my carbon footprint as well from all the flights. But we'll be traveling to... I'll be going to London next, and then I'm heading towards Africa. I come back to Vrindavan with a group in March. Then I'm heading to Germany. Then I head to South Africa, Australia later in the year. So walking the earth, person to person, place to place, heart to heart, learning, growing, and trying to share something in the process. And meeting wonderful souls like yourself who are doing wonderful things. And I think it's just, I can't have asked for anything more for my life. I'm doing everything I wanted to do. And so every day I count my blessings and pray that I can make some contribution in some small way.
No, you're making significant contributions, and I've, especially through, I think, social media, I've had the honor to meet you in person today, but it almost seems like I kind of know you because, there's so much messaging that you've put out there. So it doesn't matter where the seeker is, you're actually meeting them in their homes, on their screens, so that they can they can learn and actually take away from all your teachings. So thank you for doing that, and I hope you keep doing more and more of it.
Yeah, it's been an honor. Social media is a world in and of itself, as you know, as well as I do. But it's a beautiful way to connect with people. And we also have some books that we've produced on the Gita and different kind of contemporary ways in which to see the ancient teachings and how to apply them. So yeah, everyone's welcome to take a look online and Yeah, really, again, thank you for your opportunity, giving us the opportunity to be here.
Oh, you're embarrassing me. It's an honor and a privilege to have you. Thank you so much. And we'll put those links in the description
Sure.
so people can go in and learn more about the wonderful teachings that you have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.